The message reached him in the most unceremonious way possible. His terminal flickered, buzzed like it had swallowed a dying insect, and then displayed a line of text that made him check twice to see if someone had replaced his system with a prank program. Royal summons. Immediate attendance required. No explanation, no technical specification, not even a polite greeting, just coordinates and a countdown timer that suggested whoever sent it had a very low tolerance for delays. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen as if it might apologize. "That's not how service requests usually work," he muttered. "Where's the part where you tell me what's broken so I can pretend I already know how to fix it?" The terminal, unsurprisingly, offered no clarification. By the time he arrived at the palace, if that was even the correct word for a structure that seemed to grow out of the planet itself like a living organism, he had already convinced himself that this was either a mistake or the worst possible upgrade request in the history of maintenance work. The walls shimmered faintly, as though composed of layers of translucent metal and light, and the air hummed with a frequency that made his teeth feel slightly out of alignment. "Great," he whispered, rubbing his jaw. "The building vibrates. That's normal. Totally normal." Two guards escorted him through corridors that curved in ways geometry teachers would refuse to acknowledge. They did not speak. They did not even look at him. Their armor reflected the ambient glow of the walls, making them appear less like soldiers and more like moving sculptures. He cleared his throat after several minutes of silence. "So, do I get a hint? Broken console? Power fluctuation? Sentient door that refuses to open unless complimented?" "Nothing." "Right. Strong, silent type. I respect that." When the doors finally opened, the change in atmosphere was immediate. The chamber beyond was vast, impossibly so, its ceiling disappearing into a soft radiance that resembled a captured sky. Figures lined the sides. Nobles, he assumed, though their expressions were far too composed to give anything away. Every eye turned toward him as he stepped inside, and for a brief moment he considered turning around and pretending he had taken a wrong corridor. Too late. At the far end of the chamber stood a raised platform, and on it the Queen. He had seen images of her species before, though none of them had prepared him for the reality. She looked human at first glance, graceful, poised, undeniably striking, but the illusion unraveled the longer he looked. Her ears extended in elegant, elongated points, framing her face in a way that felt both alien and perfectly natural. Her gaze held a depth that made him acutely aware of every questionable life decision he had ever made, including the one that brought him here. He straightened instinctively, then immediately regretted it when he realized he had no idea what the correct posture was in a room like this. Standing too straight felt like a challenge. Standing too casually felt like an insult. He settled for something in between, which probably looked like he had forgotten how his spine worked. A voice echoed through the chamber, clear and controlled. "You are the human technician." He nodded. "That depends. If something's broken, yes. If this is about taxes, I'm suddenly someone else." A faint ripple passed through the room. Whether it was amusement or shock, he couldn't tell. The Queen, however, remained composed, though there was the slightest shift in her expression, as if she were trying to understand something unexpected. "You were summoned because you possess a certain unpredictability." He blinked. "That's a very polite way of saying I don't follow instructions." Another pause. This time he was almost certain he saw the corner of her lips move, just slightly. "Step forward." He did, resisting the urge to look over his shoulder for someone more qualified. Each step felt heavier than it should, the air itself pressing against him as if testing his resolve. When he reached the base of the platform, he realized he had forgotten to prepare anything resembling a proper introduction. "Hi," he said. The silence that followed was so complete, it felt engineered. He winced. "I mean, greetings. Formal greetings. Very respectful greetings." The Queen descended the steps with measured precision, her presence intensifying with every movement. Up close, the subtle differences became more pronounced. The faint luminescence of her skin, the intricate patterns woven into her attire, the way her eyes seemed to hold layers of thought all at once. She stopped in front of him, studying him with an intensity that made him consider confessing to crimes he hadn't committed just to break the tension. Then she spoke. "I have chosen you." His brain, which had been struggling to keep up since he entered the chamber, finally gave up entirely. "I'm sorry," he said. "Chosen me for what exactly? Because if this is about fixing something, I should warn you. I'm better with machines than whatever this is." A murmur spread through the court. He ignored it. The Queen did not. "For marriage." The word landed with the subtlety of a collapsing star. He stared at her, waiting for the part where someone laughed or explained that this was an elaborate cultural test he was currently failing. Nothing happened. "Oh," he said. That was it. That was all his mind could produce. Somewhere deep in the part of his brain responsible for survival, a warning siren began to wail. "This is important," it said. "You should think carefully before responding." He didn't. "Okay," he said. The chamber froze. He felt it immediately. The shift, the collective intake of breath, the sudden, overwhelming awareness that he had just done something irreversible. His own thoughts caught up a second too late. "Okay," he repeated, this time with significantly more doubt. The Queen's gaze sharpened, not with anger, but with something far more unsettling. Interest. "You accept," she said. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then did what he always did when faced with a situation he didn't understand. He leaned into it. "I mean," he said slowly, "it would be rude not to, right?" Somewhere in the chamber, someone made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh or a suppressed scream. He wasn't sure which was worse. The silence did not end quickly. It stretched, thinned, and settled over the chamber, like a transparent barrier that no one dared to break. He could feel dozens of eyes still locked onto him, waiting, judging, calculating, or perhaps just trying to confirm that what they had heard was real. He cleared his throat, softly this time, as if loud sounds might make the situation worse. "So, is there a form I need to sign, or did I just verbally agree to something legally binding across multiple star systems?" No one answered. The Queen, however, did not look away. "You do not understand what you have accepted," she said, her voice calm, though something beneath it carried a weight he could not quite measure. "That is correct," he replied immediately. "I understand absolutely nothing. I usually aim for at least 30% comprehension before making life decisions. But today we are clearly trying something new." A faint ripple passed through the court again, this time unmistakably amusement, though tightly restrained. He took that as a good sign. If they were capable of laughing, they were less likely to vaporize him. The Queen studied him for another long moment, then turned slightly, addressing the gathered nobles. "It is done." The words carried authority that did not require repetition. The murmurs rose instantly, controlled, hushed, but undeniably present. He caught fragments of alien language, tones shifting between disbelief and something sharper, something more cautious. He leaned a little closer to her, lowering his voice. "I don't suppose it is done, can be undone?" "No," she said. "Right. Good. Just checking. Always good to check these things early." She began to walk, not waiting to see if he would follow. He hesitated for half a second before realizing that staying still in a room full of alien nobility, who now considered him something between a curiosity and a threat, was probably not the best idea. He followed. The chamber doors closed behind them with a sound so soft it felt deliberate, like the room itself was choosing not to disturb the moment further. The corridors beyond seemed quieter than before, the hum in the walls softer, as if the structure was listening. He glanced at her as they walked. Up close, without the weight of the entire court pressing in, she seemed different. Still composed, still distant in a way he couldn't fully grasp. But there was something else now. A question, perhaps, or a curiosity she hadn't expected to feel. "So," he said, folding his hands behind his back to stop himself from gesturing too much. "Hypothetically speaking, if someone were to accept a royal marriage without knowing the details, what kind of consequences are we talking about?" She did not answer immediately. "You will remain," she said at last. "You will learn, and you will fulfill the role you have accepted." He nodded slowly. "That sounds appropriately vague and slightly terrifying." They turned a corner, and the architecture shifted again, the walls becoming smoother, less ornate. The lighting adjusted subtly, following her presence more than any fixed source. He tried not to stare at that. Tried, failed. "Your building reacts to you," he said, glancing at the walls. "That's efficient. Back home, the best we have is motion sensors that turn off the lights at the worst possible moment." "It responds to authority," she replied. He considered that. "So if I wave my hand dramatically, nothing happens?" "Nothing." He waved his hand anyway. Nothing happened. "Good," he said. "I would have been very concerned if that worked." She stopped walking. He nearly walked past her before catching himself, turning back with what he hoped was a smooth recovery and not an obvious display of confusion. "There is something you must understand," she said, her gaze steady. "This is not a symbolic union. It is not a gesture. It is binding, socially, politically, biologically." He blinked. "Biologically?" She held his gaze. He blinked again. "I feel like that word should have come up earlier." "You answered without hesitation." "That is increasingly sounding like a personal flaw." For the first time she exhaled in a way that was almost a quiet laugh. It was brief, subtle, but unmistakable. "You are unlike the others," she said. "I've been told that," he replied, "usually right before something goes wrong." She stepped closer, not enough to invade his space, but enough that he could feel the shift in the air between them. There was no hostility in it, no threat, but it carried a gravity he couldn't ignore. "I said something else," she continued, "before you answered." He frowned slightly, replaying the moment in his head. The chamber, the silence, her voice. His expression changed. "Oh," he said. The realization landed slowly, like a delayed signal finally reaching its destination. "You said you had a daughter." The corridor seemed quieter than before. "Yes." He rubbed the back of his neck, letting out a small breath. "Right. Of course. That would be the part I completely skipped over." "She is part of this," the Queen said. "She is not separate from it." He nodded more seriously now. The humor didn't vanish, but it shifted, softened. "I figured as much," he said. "Still, feels like the kind of detail that should come with, I don't know, a warning label. Accepting this proposal includes additional responsibilities. Terms and conditions apply." Her gaze did not waver, but there was something else there now, something searching. "Does this change your answer?" she asked. The question hung between them, heavier than anything that had come before. He thought about it. Not long, but long enough to matter. Then he shook his head. "No," he said. "It just means I should probably start asking better questions." A pause, then quietly, "Where is she?" The Queen did not answer immediately, and for a moment he wondered if he had crossed some invisible line again. There seemed to be many of those here. Lines that existed without markings, rules without explanation, expectations without warning. He was beginning to suspect that surviving in this place required either perfect awareness or complete ignorance, and he was fairly certain he only qualified for the second. "She is within the inner sector," the Queen said at last. "She has been observing." He blinked. "Observing what?" "You." He stopped walking. "Of course she has," he murmured. "That makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't a royal child secretly observe a random human who accidentally agreed to marry her mother? That's normal." The Queen continued forward, leaving him half a step behind before he hurried to catch up. "She requested it," the Queen added. "That's somehow more concerning," he replied. "Does she often request to observe strangers who make questionable life decisions?" "She is curious." "I am starting to feel like a very educational experience." The corridor shifted again as they moved deeper, the architecture becoming less ceremonial and more personal. The walls lost their towering scale, narrowing slightly, the light softening into something warmer. The faint hum he had noticed earlier changed tone, becoming less mechanical, more rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat woven into the structure itself. He glanced around, lowering his voice instinctively. "This part feels different." "It is," the Queen said. "It is not meant for the court." "Good," he muttered, "because I don't think the court likes me." "They do not understand you." That makes two of us. They reached a set of doors that did not open immediately. Instead, the surface shimmered, forming patterns that moved like liquid light. He leaned slightly to the side, trying to see if there was some kind of control panel. Do I wave at this one too, or? The doors parted silently. Right, he said. Authority, I forgot. The space beyond was unlike anything he had seen so far. It wasn't vast or imposing. It was lived in. Structures curved organically, forming alcoves and platforms at varying heights. Small floating constructs drifted slowly through the air, projecting soft light in shifting shapes. Some resembled miniature star systems, others unfamiliar geometries that twisted and folded in ways his eyes struggled to follow. And in the center of it all, movement. He saw her before she spoke, a small figure seated on the floor, or what passed for a floor, surrounded by hovering fragments of light that responded to her touch. She turned as the doors opened, her attention shifting instantly. He froze, not because she looked dangerous, because she didn't. She looked normal, almost. The same subtle differences were there, the long, elegant ears, the faint glow beneath her skin, the way her eyes held a depth that didn't belong to someone her size. But everything else, her posture, the way she tilted her head, the quiet intensity of her gaze, felt disarmingly familiar. She stood up slowly, brushing her hands together as the floating constructs dissolved into faint particles of light. So, she said, her voice was clear, steady. You're the one who said yes. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I feel like I should apologize, he said finally. Just in general, I don't know for what yet, but it seems appropriate. She studied him, her expression unreadable for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then unexpectedly, she smiled. It wasn't wide or exaggerated, just enough to shift the entire atmosphere of the room. You're strange, she said. He exhaled. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me today. She took a step closer, then another, circling him slightly as if inspecting something that didn't quite match its description. You don't look like the others, she continued. I was under the impression I was the only one, he replied. That is also strange. Thank you. I try to maintain consistency. She stopped in front of him again, closer now. He resisted the urge to step back, mostly because he had a feeling that would send the wrong message. You didn't hesitate, she said. He glanced briefly at the Queen, then back at her. I did internally. It just didn't make it to the outside in time. She tilted her head. Why? He considered the question. I think, he said slowly, I thought it would be a misunderstanding. Like when you accidentally agree to something and then everyone laughs and explains what actually happened. She didn't laugh. That didn't happen, she said. No, he admitted. It very much did not. A pause. Then she took another step closer, close enough now that he could see the subtle patterns in her eyes, shifting like distant constellations. Do you regret it? She asked. The question landed quietly, but it carried weight. He didn't answer immediately this time. I don't know yet, he said honestly. I just got here. I haven't even figured out where the exits are. She looked at him for a moment longer, then nodded slightly, as if accepting the answer for what it was. That is reasonable, she said. He let out a small breath. Good. I was worried I'd already failed some kind of test. You probably have, she replied. He blinked. That was quick. She smiled again, a little more this time. I like you, she said. He stared at her. Then slowly. That feels like an important statement. It is. He glanced at the Queen again, unsure if there was a protocol for this part of the conversation. The Queen remained silent, observing, but there was something different in her expression now. Something softer, though still controlled. He looked back at the girl. Well, he said, I'm glad, because I have a feeling I'm going to need at least one ally here. She considered that. You have two, she said, gesturing briefly toward her mother. He followed the motion, then looked back at her. Right, he said. No pressure at all. She stepped past him then, moving toward the floating constructs that had begun to reassemble themselves. With a simple motion of her hand, they shifted again, forming a small, rotating cluster of light. Can you fix things? She asked, not looking at him this time. He smiled faintly. Usually, he said, though I'm starting to suspect this might be outside my usual skill set. She glanced back at him over her shoulder. Then you should start learning, she said. He nodded. Yeah, he murmured. That sounds like a very good idea. He did not sleep well. Not because the room assigned to him was uncomfortable. On the contrary, it adapted itself to his presence with unsettling precision. The surface he lay on adjusted its firmness every time he shifted. The ambient light dimmed when his eyes closed, and the air temperature followed his breathing pattern as if it were trying to anticipate his thoughts. That's not comforting, he muttered into the darkness. That's invasive. The wall across from him shimmered faintly, as if acknowledging the complaint. I don't need emotional support from architecture, he added. I need a door that locks. The wall did not respond. He sighed, turning onto his side, then onto his back again, staring up at a ceiling that wasn't really a ceiling, but a projection of something vast and distant. Stars, maybe, or a simulation of them. He couldn't tell. That was the problem with this place. Everything looked real until you thought about it too long. His thoughts circled the same question over and over. Marriage. He pressed his hands over his face. Right, he whispered. Still real. Still not a misunderstanding. A soft chime broke the silence. He froze. That's either very good or very bad, he said. A section of the wall dissolved, not opening so much as deciding to no longer be there. A small floating construct entered, carrying what looked like a thin translucent panel. He sat up slowly. If that's breakfast, I have concerns. The construct hovered closer, the panel lighting up with shifting symbols that rearranged themselves into something he could understand. Instruction, orientation. He stared at it. Of course, he said, there's an orientation. That makes sense, because nothing says I accidentally married a queen like a scheduled onboarding process. The panel shifted again, displaying a list. Protocol alignment, cultural integration, biological compatibility assessment. He stopped reading. Nope, he said, pushing himself off the surface. We're going to take this one step at a time, and that step is going to be, pretend I didn't see that last part. The construct did not react. Good, he added. We understand each other. The inner sector felt different during what he assumed was morning, though the concept itself seemed optional here. The lighting had shifted again, softer but brighter, and the structures carried a subtle energy that made everything feel more active. He found her before she found him, or rather, he found the chaos that followed her. A cluster of floating constructs spun rapidly in the air, colliding, separating, reforming into shapes that looked increasingly unstable. She stood in the center of it, hands moving with deliberate precision, her focus absolute. He stopped a few steps away. Is that supposed to be doing that? He asked. One of the constructs shot past him, narrowly missing his shoulder before dissolving into a stream of light. I'm going to assume that means yes, he added. She didn't look at him immediately. It's learning, she said. He glanced at the shifting mass. It looks like it's panicking. It is adjusting. It is definitely panicking. She flicked her fingers, and the entire formation froze mid-motion, suspended in perfect stillness. Then slowly she turned to him. You are early, she said. I didn't sleep, he replied. She studied him for a moment. Why? He gestured vaguely behind him. Your walls breathe. They regulate. They judge, he corrected. A faint smile appeared. You will adapt, she said. That's what I'm afraid of. She stepped past him, and the constructs resumed their movement, slower this time, more controlled. You were given orientation, she said. He hesitated. I saw it, he admitted. And? I have decided to ignore most of it until I understand at least one part of it. She tilted her head slightly. That is inefficient. It's survival. She considered that, then nodded once, as if accepting the logic. Come, she said. He followed her through a series of curved passages, the environment shifting subtly with each step. The hum in the walls grew stronger, more defined, until it began to resemble something structured. Data, maybe. information moving through the building itself. "What is this place exactly?" he asked. "It is the core," she said. "That explains nothing." "It is where decisions are made." He glanced around. "By who?" She looked at him. He stopped walking. "Right," he said. "Of course, you. And my mother. And the walls. They assist." He nodded slowly. "I was afraid you were going to say that." They entered a chamber unlike the others, circular, open, with a central structure that rose from the floor like a column of light. Within it, countless symbols moved in layered patterns, intersecting, diverging, reforming. He stared. "Okay," he said quietly. "That's definitely something I can't fix with a wrench." She stepped toward it, placing her hand just outside the surface. The patterns shifted instantly, responding to her presence. "This is where the system integrates," she said. "With what?" he asked. She hesitated. "With us." He blinked. "I'm sorry. Did you just say the system integrates with you?" "Yes." He took a slow step back. "Okay," he said. "New question. Hypothetically, if someone were not originally part of the system, you are now." He closed his eyes briefly. "Of course I am," he murmured. The column of light shifted again, reacting this time not to her, but to him. The patterns flickered, adjusting, searching. He felt it before he understood it. A subtle pressure, like the system was trying to read him the way the walls did. He pointed at it. "It's doing something." "Yes." "Is it supposed to be doing something?" "Yes." "Should I be concerned?" She thought about it. "Probably." He exhaled slowly. "That's not reassuring." The patterns stabilized, forming a new sequence that neither of them had seen before. She stepped closer, her expression sharpening. "It is adapting," she said. He folded his arms. "Everything here adapts." "Yes." He looked at her, then at the column. "Then I guess I should start doing the same," he said. She met his gaze, something unreadable passing between them. "Yes," she said quietly. The system did not forget him. He noticed it first in the smallest ways. Doors that opened a fraction of a second before he reached them, as if anticipating hesitation. Lights that adjusted not just to his presence, but to his mood. Dimmer when he grew quiet, brighter when his thoughts sharpened. Even the air seemed to shift differently around him now, no longer testing, but accommodating. "I don't like that," he said, standing in the middle of a corridor that curved too smoothly to feel natural. "It's like I've been adopted by the building." "You have," the daughter replied. He turned his head slightly. That was not comforting. She walked beside him, hands clasped behind her back, her pace perfectly matched to his without appearing to try. The floating constructs followed her at a distance, slower now, more stable than before. "It recognizes you," she continued. "You are part of the system." "I preferred it when I wasn't," he said. "Things were simpler. I was confused, but in a familiar way." She glanced at him. "You are still confused." "That's true," he admitted, "but now it feels official." They reached a wide opening that overlooked one of the inner sectors. From above, the structure unfolded like a living circuit, pathways intersecting, light flowing through embedded channels, patterns shifting in response to unseen inputs. He leaned slightly over the edge, careful not to get too close. "Okay," he said. "I'll admit that's impressive." "It is efficient," she said. "It's also slightly intimidating." "It is meant to be." He nodded. "Good. That means my reaction is appropriate." A faint vibration moved through the structure beneath them. Not strong, not alarming, but enough to be noticeable. He straightened. That didn't feel normal. She didn't answer immediately. The light patterns below shifted, their rhythm breaking for just a moment before reassembling. "It is adjusting," she said. "That's what you said last time," he replied. "Last time, adjusting meant it started reacting to me." She looked at him. "It is still reacting to you." He blinked. "I don't remember agreeing to be this interesting." "You did," she said simply. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Right." The vibration came again, slightly stronger this time. He stepped back from the edge. "Okay," Now I'm definitely concerned. The floating constructs around her shifted, responding to the change in the environment. Their movements became sharper, more focused, as if they were waiting for instruction. She raised her hands slightly and they stilled. "Stay here," she said. He stared at her. That is exactly the kind of sentence that makes people not stay here. She didn't argue. Instead, she turned and moved toward the central pathways, her pace quick but controlled. He watched her go, then looked at the shifting patterns below, then back at the corridor behind him. He sighed. "Yeah," he muttered. "I'm not staying here." He didn't have to follow her far. The disturbance led him. The deeper he moved into the structure, the more noticeable the changes became. The hum in the walls lost its steady rhythm, breaking into uneven pulses. Light patterns flickered, not failing, but recalculating faster than they could stabilize. He slowed as he approached the central chamber. The column of light was different now. The patterns inside it moved erratically, no longer layered in harmony, but colliding, overlapping, rewriting themselves in rapid succession. Symbols formed and dissolved before he could even begin to recognize them. She stood at the edge of it, her posture rigid, her attention fixed. "Tell me that's normal," he said as he stepped beside her. "It is not," she replied. "Good, he said. "I was worried I was overreacting." The column shifted again, this time reacting directly to his presence. The patterns nearest to him slowed, isolating themselves from the chaos around them. He pointed. "That part, that's me, isn't it?" "Yes, of course it is." He took a cautious step closer, watching as the isolated patterns began to reorganize, forming a structure that looked simpler, cleaner, stable. The rest of the column responded. The erratic movement didn't stop, but it changed. Instead of random collisions, the patterns began to align with the structure forming near him, as if using it as a reference. He frowned. "That's not supposed to happen," he said. "You do not know what is supposed to happen," she replied. "That's true," he admitted, "but I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to fix your entire system by standing next to it." The light intensified slightly, the patterns accelerating. She stepped closer to him, her expression sharper now, more focused than he had seen before. "It is integrating," she said. "With what?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "You." He exhaled slowly. "Yeah. I was afraid you were going to say that." The column pulsed, a wave of light moving outward through the chamber, then beyond, into the structure itself. He felt it pass through him, not physically, but something else, like the system was testing the boundaries of where he ended and it began. He took another step back. "That feels personal," he said. She didn't respond. Instead, she placed her hand against the edge of the column again, her connection stabilizing part of the flow. The patterns near her calmed, but the section linked to him remained active, shifting, evolving. "It is learning from you," she said. He gave a short laugh. "That's a terrible idea. It may not have a choice." "Neither did I," he replied. The light dimmed slightly, the intensity easing, but the change remained. The structure was different now, not broken, not unstable, changed. He looked at her. "So," he said, "hypothetically speaking, what happens if your system decides it likes me?" She met his gaze. "Then everything changes." He nodded once, glancing back at the column. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I'm starting to get that." The change did not announce itself with alarms or warnings. It settled in quietly, like a decision that had already been made somewhere beyond his reach. He noticed it when the walls stopped hesitating. Before, everything here had reacted to him with a slight delay, as if the system needed to confirm his existence before responding. Now it didn't wait. It adjusted instantly, seamlessly, as though it had already predicted what he would do. He paused in the corridor, testing it. He took a step forward. The light shifted before his foot touched the ground. He leaned slightly to the left. The wall curved subtly, giving him more space. He exhaled. "Okay," he said under his breath. "That's new. That's very new." "You are synchronized." He turned. She stood a few steps behind him, watching with that same calm focus. Though there was something else beneath it now, something sharper, more alert. "I preferred confused visitor," he replied. This feels like I've been upgraded without reading the patch notes. She moved closer, her gaze flicking briefly to the walls, then back to him. It is accelerating, she said. That sounds like the opposite of stable. It is beyond stable. He frowned. Those two things shouldn't be the same. A faint pulse moved through the corridor, not violent, but deliberate. The system wasn't struggling anymore. It was aligning. With him. He rubbed his face. I knew saying yes that fast would come back to haunt me. It is not punishment, she said. I didn't say it was. I'm just saying, if there was ever a moment to hesitate, that was probably it. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she turned slightly, her attention shifting beyond him. They are coming, she said. He followed her gaze. Footsteps, not many, not loud, but precise. He straightened instinctively, then immediately relaxed again. Let me guess. This is the part where important people arrive and look at me like I broke something. You changed something, she corrected. Same result. The figures entered the corridor without announcement. Their presence felt heavier than the guards he had seen before, not physically, but in the way the system itself seemed to acknowledge them. The light adjusted, the air stilled. Advisors, he assumed. Or something worse. They stopped a short distance away, their expressions controlled, their eyes moving between him, her, and the shifting patterns in the walls. One of them stepped forward. It has begun, they said. He tilted his head. I feel like that sentence needs more context. The figure ignored him. The system has integrated beyond projected parameters, they continued, addressing her. This was not anticipated. She didn't move. It is functioning, she said. It is evolving, the advisor replied. There is a difference. He raised a hand slightly. Hi, just to clarify, when you say evolving, do you mean in a good way or a we should all be very concerned way? No one answered him. He lowered his hand. Right, still working on my timing. The advisor's gaze shifted to him now, sharper, more direct. You are the variable. He nodded. I've been called worse. The system is adapting to you. I've noticed, he said. I'd like to formally request that it stops. It cannot. Of course it can't. The corridor pulsed again, stronger this time. The patterns in the walls flickered, then stabilized, but not in the same configuration as before. Everything felt tighter, more precise. The advisor stepped closer. If this continues, the system will no longer operate within established limits. He folded his arms. And what happens when it runs out of limits? A pause, then, we do not know. He let out a slow breath. That's my favorite answer. Silence followed. Then unexpectedly, he laughed. It wasn't loud or forced, just a short, genuine sound that broke the tension for a fraction of a second. Okay, he said, shaking his head. Let me make sure I understand this. I show up, accidentally agree to marry the most important person on the planet, and now your entire system is rewriting itself because it decided I'm interesting? No one corrected him. He pointed lightly at the walls. I don't even know how half of this works. Back home, I fix things by hitting them until they behave. You don't want that applied here. The daughter glanced at him. That would be inefficient, she said. That would be catastrophic, the advisor added. Good, he said. We're all on the same page. Another pulse moved through the structure. This one smoother, more controlled. The instability from before was gone. Whatever had started in the core had settled into something new. He felt it again. That subtle pressure, like the system was listening to him, not just reacting. He looked at her. So what now? He asked. She met his gaze, steady, unshaken. Now, she said, we understand what it is becoming. He nodded slowly. And if we don't like the answer? She didn't hesitate. Then we adapt. He glanced at the advisors, then back at her. A small smile formed. Yeah, he said. I'm starting to see a pattern here. The system no longer felt like something separate. That was the first realization he couldn't ignore. It wasn't just reacting anymore. It wasn't even adapting. It was aligned. The walls, the light, the quiet hum beneath everything, they moved with a certainty that hadn't existed before, as if the uncertainty had been replaced with something clearer. He stood in the central chamber again, staring at the column of light that had once looked chaotic, unstable. Now it was neither. It moved with intention. "That's better," he said quietly. "I think." "You are unsure," the Queen replied. He glanced at her. She stood on the opposite side of the column, her posture as composed as ever, though there was something softer in her expression now. Not uncertainty, she didn't seem capable of that, but something closer to acceptance. "I'm always unsure," he said. "It's kind of my thing." The daughter stood between them, closer to the column, her eyes following the patterns as they shifted. "It is complete," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "That sounds final." "It is stable," she corrected. He nodded slowly. "That sounds less terrifying." The advisors were there too, though they kept their distance now. Not because they had been told to, but because something had changed in the way they looked at him. The skepticism hadn't vanished, but it had adjusted, like the system itself. He took a step closer to the column. It responded immediately, the patterns shifting, not wildly, not unpredictably, but in recognition. The section nearest to him aligned, forming structures he could almost understand. Not fully, but enough to feel the logic behind them. "I still don't know how this worked," he admitted. "You do not need to," the Queen said. He smiled faintly. "That's good, because I was starting to worry there would be a test." "There will be many tests," he winced. "Of course there will." A quiet pause settled between them. Then he exhaled, longer this time, the tension that had followed him since the moment he stepped into this world finally beginning to loosen. "When I said yes," he said, glancing at her, "I thought it was a mistake." "It was impulsive," she replied. "That's a nice way of saying it." He looked at the column again. "I didn't understand anything. Not you, not this place, not what it meant." "And now?" He considered the question. "I still don't understand everything," he said, "but I understand enough." She stepped closer, the space between them no longer carrying the same weight it once had. "Enough for what?" she asked. He met her gaze. "Enough to stay." The words were simple, but they held. The daughter looked between them, then smiled. Wider this time, less restrained. "That is good," she said. He glanced at her. "Yeah?" "Yes. You are less confusing now." He laughed. "That might be the best compliment I've gotten here." She tilted her head. "It is not a compliment." "Still taking it." The Queen watched them, silent for a moment longer, then turned her attention back to the column. Her hand lifted slightly, not touching it, but close enough to guide the patterns. "They will continue to question this," she said, her voice quieter now, meant for him more than the others. He followed her gaze briefly toward the advisors. "Yeah," he said. "I would too." "Does that concern you?" He shrugged lightly. "A little, but I've been the wrong answer before. Sometimes it turns out to be the right one later." She studied him. "You are certain of this?" He smiled just slightly. "No," he said, "but I'm certain enough." The system pulsed once, a soft wave of light moving outward, not disruptive, not searching. Settled. The daughter stepped closer to him, slipping her hand into his without hesitation. The gesture was small, natural, as if it had always been that way. "You will learn," she said. He looked down at her hand, then back at her. "Yeah," he said. "I think I already started." The Queen moved to stand beside them, not distant now, not elevated, present. For a moment none of them spoke. They didn't need to. The chamber felt different, not because it had changed again, but because it no longer needed to. The uncertainty that had once defined everything here had been replaced, not with perfect understanding, but with something stronger. Balance. He took a slow breath, letting it settle. "So," he said, glancing between them, "just to confirm, no more surprises, right?" The daughter smiled. The Queen didn't. "There will always be surprises," she said. He nodded. "Yeah, that sounds about right." He looked back at the column one last time, then away from it. And for the first time since he arrived, he didn't feel like he was standing in the middle of something he didn't belong to. He felt like he was part of it. "Okay," he said quietly. "I can work with that."